is. All right. We're going to go ahead and call this August 8th Community Redevelopment Agency Board to order. Very excited. I think this is our second CRA board. 30 years to get here, and now we've had 2 meetings in. With that, do I have a motion to approve the agenda as it was published? I have a motion from Commissioner Farnsworth, a second from Commissioner Martin. Noticing the absence of Commissioner Maison for the CRA board, he will be here for the regular city commission meeting. Are there any comments or questions on the motion on the floor from the board? Public comments, questions on the motion on the floor? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion passes unanimously. I'm going to go ahead and ask for an approval of the consent agenda as it was published.
So moved.
I have a motion from Commissioner Martin.
Second.
From Commissioner Clark. Any comments or questions on the motion on the floor from the dais? Public comments or questions on the motion on the floor? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passed unanimously. That'll take us to agenda item 2, which is the 2023 Community Redevelopment Agency budget discussion. Brian, you got to lead us through this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this will be our first year where we actually have funds that we can do some projects in the CRA. Very excited about that. Just as a refresher, members of the CRA, of the City Commission comprise the membership of the community CRA board. It's an independent, separate legal entity, so you have to have your own budget. However, it is a dependent district. And so it's an independent, separate legal entity, but it is still a dependent district. And the board mirrors the composition of the City Commission, with the mayor serving as the chair and a member of the board serving as a chair pro tem. Members of the board set the policy and direction, and the executive director is charged with administering the policy set by the board. And in the initial years, city staff can serve as the CRA until time is such that the CRA revenues generate enough funds that they can actually, the board can contemplate hiring a full-time CRA director. And currently, your director of planning and economic development, which would be me, serves as your executive director appointed by the CRA board. Reminder, the purple outline, and you have a map printout in the back, is the district map. The purple outline is the district. The red delineated area is an area that was excluded from funds being spent in that area. However, it's also an area that is developing nicely and providing funds to the CRA districts so that we can do these projects. And then you can also see the almost all except a little tiny piece that somehow we missed, which is where the schoolhouse is the historic district within the CRA district. So the actual budget, we anticipate that we're going to receive a little, well, the city will contribute $49,803. The county, which has a couple of small exemptions built in, so theirs will be slightly less at $49,000 even, for a total of $98,803. The majority of that, the proposed budget would spend in infrastructure. We have a sidewalk extension program with street lighting that'll go along with that at about $55,000. Administrative expenses for different fees and things, about $2,900. Aesthetic enhancements being things like facade grants, a landscaping program, and some additional Christmas lighting for downtown, about $27,500. And just as an aside, I'm about halfway through development of a facade grant outline for the board to see next time and approve, so we can actually implement that program and start giving out some facade grants. Professional services, $5,000. Training for the CRA professional certification, and then general operating supplies and expenses of $62,550, for a total of $98,464, which will leave a small balance of about $339. Can be rolled over, and anything that isn't spent in this year can be rolled over to next year for projects next year.
I got one question.
Commissioner Clark.
Brian, where and what do we do in so much that it takes $6,200 for office supplies and mail? Are we doing that much?
We anticipate that now that it's up and running, we actually have project money. We're going to need to develop some collateral materials to send out to the businesses in the CRA to let them know about the programs that are available.
So this is like a widespread mailing? I mean,
it'd
blanket
be-
mailing type stuff?
It'd be to every business that we can identify within the CRA, yes, sir. And then, some general office supplies, mail expenses, that kind of thing. If it's not spent, then it would roll over to next year.
Well, I
Or,
just wondered, I just wanted to make sure that if we're signing paper then with pens, do we use them over here for the CRA? Would use that for the city budget? If we're using a number 2 pencil, I just want to make sure we don't get this.
if,
Just
if,
kidding,
uh,
but that's a lot of money for supplies.
if,
Anyway,
if the
keep rolling, good
CRA,
job.
if the CRA decides to make some pens like our economic development has pens, we probably have specific CRA, little items that we give out for marketing.
I see blank
the CRA.
but that just seems like a lot of money for administrative costs.
Commissioner Farnsworth?
Brian, I was kind of wondering why the southwest area was not in the boundary. And also the little area just south of,
Are you talking about the actual map?
yeah,
That's a 30-year negotiation, buddy. You want to go back over 30-year negotiations? Yeah, you can answer the question, but that's what took us 30 years to work out.
When you say the southwest area, specifically what part are you referring to?
southwest.
outside the purple, right?
Yeah, yeah, my neighborhood.
We drew a line around his house.
Well,
Judy and I live over there.
Your neighborhood's not planted.
It's not what?
blighted, yeah, blighted.
You know that you and Judy live over there and you're still asking.
Wow. Also that I was curious about that little area just south of Hitchcock's, that little subdivision it's not in. It's harder for me to believe that this whole city is in the,
Don't say it, because that's,
I'm just saying.
yeah. Remember the negotiations, we had to argue that areas were blighted,
Yeah,
right? And generally in CRAs, you don't put undeveloped areas that aren't blighted, right? But we all also understand that if you don't put the undeveloped areas into the CRA doesn't really stand to make a whole lot of money moving forward. So there were some 30 years of negotiations going back and forth about what could be in this map and what couldn't be in this map in order to truly make the map functional. But the map is set at this point. You'd have to go back to Alachua County if you wanted to change the map. We're not, so all we're talking about now is how much money is getting generated. We've lost and 30 years from now, or 20 years from now when this CRA is up, then we'll go back to negotiating another map.
You'll still be on the board.
probably will, but I don't know, just,
We'll
To
have
the
a
chair's point, it is possible to make those amendments, but you have to go back to, and have joint approval between the city commission and the county commission on adding or subtracting anything, basically making any change to the boundary.
it just doesn't make sense to me that an area that was built in the seventies is not in the CRA, but just north of that, the subdivision built in the nineties is. So, I mean, I don't know how you came
You
up
and me
with
will
this.
talk about it
Did we vote on
over a
this?
cup of coffee.
I don't remember.
We did.
You don't remember, same subdivision, you don't remember voting on in 1920?
Oh, 20.
Yeah. I mean, there are,
I was just curious.
Yeah.
I mean, it just doesn't make a big difference.
There's
I
a
was just
lot
kinda curious
here
as
that
to
I
some-
think
Some
we-
areas were omitted
Right.
that really are much older and the housing in those areas are much worse than they are just north of.
there are
of that
things in
area.
this map where we can sincerely say thank you to the BOCC because there were some things that were granted to us here that are allowing us to look at $100,000 budget, where if those things hadn't happened, it would have been another 3, 4, 5 years before we had that much money to sit here and talk about how we wanted to budget it. I wanted to go back to the budget. Is there any thought to not really, to just letting this money roll over? Do we have to spend this money up front? Because, we're kind of limited. We've got, 27,000 in facade grants that we could work with. But if we just let this thing roll for a year or two, then we could make more impactful projects.
Mr. Mayor, the staff's thought was we wanted to try to make some initial progress and get some money out there doing projects. However, If we identify a specific project that we want to save money for because it's a larger project that's going to cost, two options. One, you can roll over the funds up to 3 years if it's for a specific project, or you can basically take out a bond to fund a larger project and pay it off over the 20 years.
The commission has if the commission wanted to identify a project that was gonna take the lump sum, you could hypothetically roll the whole amount over for a 3-year period of time.
Yes, sir.
But at some point in 3 years, if you haven't identified that project, you gotta get the money back out the door to be doing the work that it's supposed to be doing.
Yes, sir.
Or you leverage the money, right? You take out the loan and you pay it. Okay. All right, before we get too far into spending it, are we gonna have the opportunity to sort of hash, I know we only got 30 minutes tonight, and we just went back over the map. So are we gonna have the opportunity to hash out the pros and cons of, I know this commission is not one that's really interested in taking a lot of risk with leveraging, but there might be a compromise in between. We could leverage a portion of it and do a big ticket item.
Right. Mr. Chair, the one opportunity would be, and we have a little bit of money there under professional services. One thought was that there are professional consulting firms that specialize in CRAs and developing specific. We have a plan, and it's everything in the kitchen sink that can be added to the CRA or that can be worked on in a CRA. But these companies, they will come in, they'll do an assessment of your district, the money that you have in, coming, the anticipated cash flow, and then they come up with a list of very specific action items as recommendations, and then the board would choose from that list of specific recommendations, and they put together an actual action plan to move forward. And so within that action plan, we could hold off on spending the funds, put a little bit more money into the professional services for that kind of an analysis, and then come up with a specific action plan. We probably have a few workshops to talk over with the board exactly what they want to see happen over the next few years, that kind of thing, and while the development of that action plan is going on.
In our kitchen sink plan, because that's kind of how I would phrase our plan too.
Yeah.
Everything that we could potentially spend this money on. Part of the benefit of a CRA is if you do something that makes a big splash, right, you encourage more businesses to come down, right? I'm not advocating for this at all, just using it as a hypothetical example, right? But let's say the commission wanted to put a splash park in the middle of downtown, right, on the pretense that that would help businesses around it come and sell retail and those kinds of things, right? That's the kind of mindset I want to do. Are we able to have that sort of big splash plan in the kitchen sink plan, or do we need the action plan in order to have a big ticket item? Because it seems to me like this is going to be piecemeal out over the next 20 years, and we're going to spend $3 million, but it's going to be 100,000 here, 200,000 there. We're never going to have that big ticket splash.
Mr. Chair, I think year one, we just wanted to try to make a little bit of a splash around the CRA, and then year two, we would have developed the plan, the actual action plan, which would include any big ticket items the board wanted to move forward on. But certainly, we can devote pretty much all of our emphasis on that initially, and then move forward on that specific action plan at the board's direction.
Other questions, thoughts? Was this the end of your presentation?
Yes,
You got
sir.
some more? Commissioner Clark.
Brian, with the infrastructure on this particular expenses, where are these sidewalks at? Or is there already a particular sidewalk that needs it, or is this just something that we're gonna do?
Mr. Chair, the city's been developing a plan for some sidewalk extensions on the north side of the downtown area. And we don't have the specific ones laid out just yet, but this would most likely, because it is it's $50,000, it sounds like a lot for sidewalks. Sidewalks have grown ridiculously expensive, like everything else has. So we would be pairing this with additional city money to basically make the sidewalk extension a larger project overall.
And are any of these things the Seaboard Drive project?
No, sir.
No. Okay. Commissioner Martin, you looked like you were just about to reach.
Yeah. I kind of want to see more hard project, tangible stuff. And, if we don't know where we need to be spending our money, then maybe we need to rethink what we're doing, because I don't want to go spend money on consultants and all that stuff. They just waste money, in my opinion, in a lot of circumstances. We've got a lot of soft costs in here, administrative services, professional certifications, like Commissioner Clark brought up with the extra supplies and all that stuff. It just seems a little fluff-ish to me. Even I like Christmas as much as the next guy, but, lighting it's expense that only comes up once a month, or once a year. I'd rather see stuff that's more into the downtown facade stuff or the sidewalk stuff myself. Just tangible stuff that people can actually see.
I mean, this isn't a very detailed budget, but part of the benefit of the facade grants is that gives us a chance to double our money, right? You go to a downtown business and you say, hey, you want to pressure wash this building, that's going to be $5,000. You can come and, we'll give you a $2,500 grant. You get a $2,500 grant. We can clean up all these downtown buildings, those kinds of things. So the grants, in my mind, have always been sort of a matching kind of a situation where we go and we offer some assistance, because everybody in town thinks the city owns all these buildings and wants to know when we're going to pressure wash them and clean the trees growing off the roofs and the ferns growing out of the side. And this would be an opportunity for us to go to some of these business owners who, quite frankly, I don't know if they have a lot of incentive because they're not retail businesses, and say, we want to beautify and clean up downtown. We've got some skin in the game to help you accomplish that. And then it just allows what we can do with that money to grow, because we're not funding the whole thing. Remember Commissioner Coleman out there pressure washing the sidewalk one year.
Sure did that.
Yeah, he made it all the way through one panel. Okay, other thoughts? So, I mean, I kind of like the idea of going ahead and moving forward this year, getting some infrastructure. Let's see, every time we put some street lights up or do a sidewalk, let's take some pictures to tell people, funded through the CRA, kind of see the kinds of things that we can do with this money. And then sometime over the course of next year, let's take a bigger, larger picture approach. Because I would hate to get to the end of this 20-year cycle and say, well, we paid for a lot of stuff, but you never got that splash that really does drive the rest of the development. Commissioner Coleman?
Well, the bad thing is you got to spend money at least every 3 years, right? Yeah. So we can't let it just build up. That's what, I don't really care for that part of it.
Mr. Chair, I think the reasoning behind that is that if you've got a project that costs that much, you should bond it. You should borrow the money, get the project done in the beginning of the CRA, and then pay for it over time. Yeah.
Remember that the CRA, the county matches us for every increase in property values. So if we get somebody to come in and build a new building or clean up a building and the value of the building goes up, that benefits us. If there's a development that happens inside the CRA that wasn't there before, that benefits us. So if nothing happens in the area of blight and the taxable value stays the same, then the CRA stays at zero, right? So we have an invested incentive to launch it and try to help it go so that it can really flourish. There's already been a couple of developments that weren't part of it, that weren't on the books when we drew the map. That is the reason why we're recognizing revenue so early in this process.
Yes, sir.
So do we have a motion, Brian, that you've written on here, that you have a proposed motion? You want feedback on this budget?
Yes, sir. This was basically for discussion and feedback and direction. The budget has to be passed by resolution, and so either the first or second meeting in September, we'll have the resolution drawn up based on the feedback we get tonight.
So I've heard, let's get a little more in the infrastructure. Let's see if we can streamline the operating supplies. Commissioner Martin?
Per the backup, it's not numbered on this thing, but 3, 4, 5, and 6, they total up to about 16,000. I would propose and like you all to entertain maybe even just taking half of that and putting it back into those more tangible projects, like either the sidewalk or the facade. I think the facade, we get a huge ROI on that. Those awnings are just terrible. If we can get a halfway buy-in, that will 8, maybe another 16 grand total on that. So again, just to repeat, moving 3, 4, 5, and 6, total those up to 8, take the other 8, dump it back into the tangible stuff. You guys all right with that?
Hang on. Tell them the page that you're on.
So the administration, professional,
Yep,
training, and operational,
yep,
those total $16,000.
okay.
If we just take half of that, leave it there, and take the other half and put it back into the aesthetics,
And infrastructure.
my priority would be the facade grants. Take that 8 and put it right into the facade grants. If we're gonna try to get the businesses to double that, we're turning 8 into 16. And I feel like the downtown would be a huge ROI to clean that up. I get more complaints about how ugly downtown is than probably
And
anything else.
signs clean.
Mayor, what's ROI mean?
Return on investment.
Okay.
Ricky
Thought
over.
it had something to do with me.
Yeah.
I
Alright.
agree.
I've got head nods. Are you talking about the training? I'm not looking at that. The CRA Administrative Professional Certification? I'm not sure that we have.
Yeah, that is one of them, but
Do we have the opportunity to not do that? I thought that was part of the agreement.
Well, we may need that.
No? Okay. Well,
That-
let's take
there's
those,
other money in.
yeah, take those suggestions and
There'll
you'll
still
bring
be
it back.
money
Right.
in that portion.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you gotta get that. Training is important. But I'm with you. We need to put
Well,
some money elsewhere.
If you look at High Springs, Gainesville's been the worst offender, but there's, going astray on how you spend the CRA money is one of the number one reasons why it took us so long to get here, because everyone the county has made this agreement with has abused it, whether intentionally or unintentionally. So the training, I think, is it. Let's just make sure that everybody's in agreement that we're doing things up and up legally,
Training's important.
Okay, we got enough feedback because we're running out of time here. You got
Think so.
everything you need?
Yes, sir.
We don't need a motion tonight. This was feedback and discussion. I'm gonna move to comments. Who is the executive director? Is that you? You got any comments?
No, sir?
All right. CRA attorney, do you have any comments on?
No, sir.
Wonderful. Madam Clerk? Thank you. Commissioner Martin, our board member Martin,
No, sir, I'm good.
board member Farnsworth,
Nope.
board member Clark, board member Coleman.
I got a 30-minute speech I need to.
Thank you, I
go
appreciate
over.
that, yeah. I needed a nap. Yep. All right, I have no comments as well. Citizen comment. Hearing no citizen comment, we are adjourned. Take a 5